Got another question this week about hell, and it was a interesting question. In that the ability to frame it. I think what we'll do is we'll just talk about hell a little bit again, um, and how do you not go to hell, or the question was like that: how do you not go to hell? How do you go to hell? Like, what is hell? How do we not get there? But how do you get there? I guess it's a topic that people are processing. Um, how do you get to hell? Well, maybe you are familiar with the TV show with Michael Landon in the 1980s called Highway to Heaven. And remember the angel, he played an angel, the actor did, Michael Landon. And he was going around doing good. This was like the precursor to Touched by an Angel that would come out, a decade later or so. And then around the same time you've got Highway to Heaven, then you had that infamous album from AC/DC, Highway to Hell, um, which, if I understand it correctly, is about Detroit. Sorry, everybody that's in Detroit that may see this. But when Jesus talks about hell, he's talking about something real, something very real. Why is he talking about it so much? And there's something about hell and about sin that we have to keep together. And here's one of them right here. Our natural disposition as human beings is not godliness. Our natural disposition is not righteousness or goodness. We are not born morally good. We are born in sin and in trespasses. In the Genesis chapter 1, God makes creation, makes everything. And then one of the laws that he builds into creation is that kind reproduces after its kind. So cats have cats, birds have birds, chickens have lions. Oh, no, chickens don't give birth to lions, right? If you plant an apple tree, you don't pull oranges from it, unless you're talking about genetically modified organisms, and that's not natural, right? Not in that sense as it's used today. And I bring that part up because we want to think that we can splice and maneuver things around in ourselves, and we can make ourselves from being an apple tree into being an orange tree. We can say that no, really the selfishness, the evil tendencies of the heart, we can just kind of educate ourselves out of that. That's just not the case. If you look at world history, it's very difficult to look at what happens in Germany under the Nazis and say that those people were not educated. Education doesn't clean and change and transform the heart. Only the gospel does that. And this is where hell comes in, because hell wasn't created by God for us, for humanity. It was created for the devil and for his angels, for demonic spirits. So how is it then that people end up in hell if God didn't make hell for people and he didn't make people for hell? How does that happen? How do we end up going into hell? How do we get out of it? Christ. Christ is the answer. Jesus is the solution. The transforming of our nature and our characters. When we talk about being saved by faith, even the Bible talks about the faith of the demons in the book of James. James says even the demons believe, but they have enough sense to tremble. They fear God, even though they believe. So if you say, I believe, but your faith isn't moving you to acts of love, then your faith is no better than the demonic faith. You have to move forward to believe and to trust Christ, to cling to him, to hold to him, because faith is a verb. That's how you get out. It's by clinging to Jesus, believing upon him. And really, if you think you're clinging to him, it's because he's clinging to you. But, parsing these things out, how do you end up in hell? Well, because you don't cling to Christ. You don't respond to Christ, because our natural disposition is to go away from him. The moment Adam and Eve sin in the garden, and they hear the voice of God calling to them, they dress themselves in fig leaves to hide. Kind produces after kind. We are people born of sinful parents. So we are born with a disposition to turning away from God. And as we grow and as we mature, no matter how educated we get, no matter how many classes on refinement that we take, our disposition is fallen. That doesn't mean that there isn't some kindness. Doesn't mean there isn't gentleness, that there isn't natural affection, that there isn't love. Doesn't mean we don't We don't share in those attributes from God, but they're all broken and fractured. And hell is kind of the collection pot for that. If you have dishes that you're using, and the dish breaks, or it gets such a bad crack in it, then it breaks into pieces, do you pick it up and put it back together? Well, this is where grace comes in. Grace is a recognition that we are all broken vessels, and Christ will repair us if we'll let him. We got to yield to him. So hell, when you're looking at hell and what's going on with hell and where does it come from and how do you get there, really, the way people get to hell, atrophy. By not responding to Jesus when he calls to us. I don't know if that's going to answer the question we got, but I think and I hope maybe it starts to clear away some of the fog and opens that up. Well, okay, so I believed in Jesus. I've heard the gospel. I believe it. What's my next step? Well, if you're not connected to a church, your next step is to find a good church. Pray, ask the Holy Spirit to lead you. Send us an email. Tell us where you are, and maybe we can connect you with somebody that we might know there somewhere. But the next step is baptism, being shaped and formed in Christian principles, growing in grace, plugging into the church. Not because all that stuff is like getting your ticket stamped to get into heaven and to get out of hell. That's not quite how it works. But it's the process of growing and believing in Jesus with the confidence and the assurance that you don't have to fear hellfire. Our disposition is to run from grace. And that's why we need grace, because grace opens up the heart to receive the Lord. So if you have any questions, shoot them to us, and we'll try to maybe unmuddy these waters a little bit if it was too muddy for you. Thanks.